We're going to dive into the difference between complex and complicated systems and why we often confuse the nature of the system that surrounds us. And therefore, we employ the wrong mental models and strategies to evolve within it, especially in leadership roles. So complex versus complicated. We're going to play a little game over here, inspired by the work of Aaron Dignan, who wrote the book Brave New Work. So complex versus complicated, these two terms should actually not be used interchangeably, yet they very often are. So we're going to do a little game, right? We're going to play complex or complicated. So I'm going to ask you just 2-3 questions. So for example, an engine, do you think that's a complex or a complicated system? What about an IKEA mobile, an IKEA piece of furniture? Is that a complex or a complicated system? A very complex or a very complicated system? What about the weather? Is that complex or complicated? How about like a city? Is that complex or is that complicated? What about an industry, right? Any industry, pharma, retail, FMCG, mobility, financial services, ICT, education, government, construction, heavy industry, whatever, you name it. Is that complex or is that complicated? And don't worry if you get these wrong. I used to get these wrong all the time. I didn't even know what the distinction was. So an engine, a piece of IKEA furniture, these are considered by systems theorists as complicated systems. There are causal relationships in them, the direct cause and effect. You can bring in an expert to fix them. You can bring in an expert to build that IKEA piece of furniture, and they'll know exactly where to apply a fix. Some can be very complicated, right? A very complicated system, but they're still considered complicated rather than complex. The other ones, cities, industries, they're considered complex. They have a direction, right? Movement, but there's no clear cause and effect. And also they're extremely hard to model, almost impossible to model and to fix. Now, other examples include, climate, organisms, human brain, infrastructure, like a power grid, transportation, communication systems, social and economic organizations like cities, but also like business organizations or business teams. And ultimately, this actually even applies to the entire universe. So we love cheat sheets. We love to make stuff actionable. So I'll give you a little complex versus complicated cheat sheet. Complicated systems, they have linear cause and effects. A causes B. They have linear inputs that cause linear outputs. More A creates more B. More gas in the car creates a longer journey that I can travel. We can decompose the system into its structural parts. We can actually model the system. The systems can be fully modeled, and complicated systems, the context and interactions can be controlled. You can control them. Whereas complex systems, they don't have clearly distinguishable cause and effect paths. Many ABCs cause many XYZs. It's multivariate. The outputs are not proportional. They're multifunctional, right? A does B, but A also does like a bit of C, a bit of D, a bit of E. It's complex. The structural parts cannot be fully known or modeled. The only correct model of a complex system is the model itself. And the most important part, the most important distinction here is this one, that lack of control. Small and well-intentioned, interventions can result in unintended consequences. You cannot fully control complex systems. And this lack of control is possibly the most important characteristics when looking at organizations, how we lead them, how we approach them. Now, there's this beautiful quote from Roberto Polli. I hope he's Italian. He sounds Italian. A phrase I really love. That was terrible. And it's that as leaders, we often mistake complex systems with complicated ones, and we try to control complex systems rather than admitting that the only thing we can do is learn to dance with these complex systems, learning to dance with complexity, to dance with the uncertainty. Because as leaders, and decision makers, we bathe in these complex systems every single day. We need to learn to dance and attempt to influence this uncertainty. They cannot be controlled with ready-made solutions. Back in the days of, pure factory work, maybe they could to some extent, but with knowledge business, a lot less. And that's actually an act of humility right there, to admit that we cannot fully control these complex systems.